freedom. To go out on the street and demonstrate is a basic right for us. And that is why we are saying that there are two Cameroons that came together. If you are telling us, like a state minister stood here last year and told us that what happened in Cameroon is like dropping a few cubes of sugar into a basin of water. Who is the sugar and who is the water? I'm asking.
That is very wrong. That is very wrong. The soldiers are on the bridge. International rule does not accept any operation on top of the bridge. I think you are shooting. Will it kill us? If they don't kill you, then the shooting will kill us here. The shooting will kill us.
Nation that you call yours.
We cannot accept this shooting.
You can do what has been done to our children in West Cameroon. I call it West Cameroon because we will never take it out of our mouths again. Because that is a territory in which we believe freedom. To go out on the street and demonstrate is a basic right for us. And that is why we are saying that there are two Cameroons that came together. If you are telling us, like a state minister stood here last year and told us that what happened in Cameroon is like dropping a few cubes of sugar into a basin of water. Who is the sugar and who is the water? I'm asking.
Everybody to get away out of that because I cannot say in this situation. Then you bring an armor to the bridge and then put soldiers to the bridge and say it's not war situation. You don't have to protect yourself. That's the thing I'm talking to now. I cannot see this kind of protest. I cannot accept this situation. We cannot accept this situation. That you bring an armor to the bridge and bring soldiers to the bridge. And the following you want to kill us? All right. I can't accept this. It is nothing to protect this place.
But when a year goes by the far, the morale will be high. They will be trying. I feel
Please, I am experiencing a war situation now. That is a war situation. That is very wrong. That is very wrong. The soldiers are on the bridge. International rule does not accept any operation on top of the bridge. I think you are shooting. Will it kill us? If they don't kill you, then the shooting will kill us here. The shooting will kill us here. We cannot accept this shooting that will kill us on the bridge here. We cannot accept it. I will never accept the situation that your weapon will kill us at this time. The shooting is into Nigeria and it's unacceptable. It is not tolerable. We cannot accept it. Don't tell me that kind of trash, my friend. Don't tell me that kind of trash. You are talking nonsense. Don't tell me that nonsense. Don't tell me that nonsense. You cannot bring soldiers on the bridge and fire into Nigeria and tell me this trash. Don't tell me that trash. You kill a Nigerian. Let any Nigerian die here. You see what will be the consequences. Please get inside and get me out of here. Don't get me. Everybody should get away out of that. Because I cannot see any situation. Then you bring an armor guy to the bridge and then put soldiers on the bridge and say it's not what situation.
Good afternoon, and good afternoon. It's almost 3 p.m. here in the great state of Texas and 3 p.m. in Southern Cameroons Ambazonia. This is Comrade Funton Daniel. I will be speaking live from the great state of Texas here in the United States. And I mean, some of you may have watched the video. I am going to replay it. There is one thing we have to understand: who is speaking the truth. Of course, there is papers circulating within the Nigerian press citing the Southern Cameroon, they call the separatists. The separatists is carrying on action in Nigeria territory. And unfortunately, that is why I brought this video to play it for everyone to watch, whether if that armor truck is from the separatists, as categorically spread widely in Nigeria. Of course, that on the opposite side is a representative of the Nigerian authority communicating about the encroachment of La Republique du Cameroun armor truck in crossing to Nigeria. So that is why I bring this for you to watch, and we're going to dwell on more and other subsequent activities. This is Comrade Funton Daniel. I will be speaking live here from the great state of Texas on the case of evidence. So stay tuned, don't go away. And I want to thank my fellow brothers and sisters here in the United States, those in South America, those in Europe, those in Ground Zero, and Russia, China, wherever you are. This is a very, very important deliberations that I will be speaking here on the question of Southern Cameroon and who is speaking the truth. So La Republique is circulating that in Taraba, the separatists carry on invasion of the Nigeria, and that false information has been circulating. So this is why I brought this video for all of us to watch and see whether who is lying who and who is speaking the truth. Let me play back the video again for all of us to watch. Stay tuned. And if you look at the side, that's Nigerian custom. If you look at the side, the person walking towards the gate is a Nigerian custom. If I'm not mistaken, if somebody can correct me for sure, the person walking towards the gate where there is a barrier is a Nigerian custom. And the opposite, the custom, is La Republique armor car that is approaching into Nigerian territory. And we have the bank and the river.
That is very wrong.
Listen to the speaker.
International rule does not accept any operation on top of the bridge. I think you are shooting, will it kill us? If they don't kill you, then the shooting will kill us here. The shooting will kill us here. We cannot accept this shooting that you kill us on the bridge here. We cannot accept it. I will never accept the situation that your weapon will kill us at this time. The shooting is into Nigeria and it's unacceptable. It is not tolerable. We cannot accept it. Don't tell me that kind of trash, my friend. Don't tell me that kind of trash. You are talking nonsense. Don't tell me that nonsense. Don't tell me that nonsense. You cannot bring soldiers on the bridge and fire into Nigeria and tell me this trash. Don't tell me that trash. You kill a Nigerian. Let any Nigerian die here. You see what will be the consequences. Please get inside and get me out of here.
I'm sure you listen to the message, and that is someone, a Nigerian, possibly, I guess, is a representative of the Nigerian, warning severely a potential consequence should there is the armored car firing at the Nigerian. So I am sure there should be Republique ground troops already encircled that particular area where you see the armored car encroaching into the Nigerian territory. Now, if those armored car belongs to an Ambazonian separatist, as they call, of course, you will disagree that armored car doesn't belong to the Ambazonian separatists. It belongs to La Republique du Cameroun military. And you can deduce from the rationale that the purpose of the intention is to draw Nigeria into the war, and several Nigerian citizens have been killed by La Republique military, and with a false claim that the people of Ambazonia decided to carry attack on Nigeria. Give me the clear rationale why the people of Southern Cameroon should carry attack on Nigeria. There is no clear evidence that the people of Southern Cameroon has any particular problems with Nigeria and to carry on attack on Nigeria in specifically. So that is why I bring this armored car to present it for those arguments that presented on the forefront that the people of Ambazonians, or the separatists as they call. But I shall come about to clarify what is separatist. But before I come to clarify what is a separatist, let's now conclude and then watch it again. Let me complete.
Don't get it. Everybody to get away out of that. Because I cannot say in this situation, then you bring an armored car to the bridge, and then put soldiers on the bridge and say it's not war situation. You don't have to protect yourself. That's the menace I'm talking to now. I cannot see this kind of problem. I cannot accept this situation. We cannot accept this situation. That you bring an armored car to the bridge and bring soldiers to the bridge and are following to the bridge. You want to kill us? All right. I can't accept this. It is nothing to protect this place.
But when a year will go to the car, the moral will be high. They will be firing. I feel like
You know, you can watch, and you look straight ahead. There is an armored car or armored truck that belongs to La Republique du Cameroun military, And before the approach of the armored truck, as you watch, it means the military of La Republique is surrounding a particular area, and that gave the opportunity for the approach of armored truck. And directly there's a gate, and that gate is the gate that separates Nigeria and the South Nigeria and the South Cameroon.
International rule does not accept any operation on top of the bridge.
And the
President, you are shooting, we need kill us. If they don't kill you, the shooting will kill us here. The shooting will kill us here. We cannot accept this shooting that you kill us on the bridge here. We cannot accept it. I will never accept the situation that your weapon will kill us at this time. The shooting is into Nigeria and it's unacceptable. It is not tolerable. We cannot accept it. Don't tell me I cannot trash, my friend. Don't tell me I cannot trash. You are talking nonsense. Don't tell me that nonsense. Don't tell me that nonsense. You cannot bring soldiers on the bridge and fire into Nigeria and tell me this trash. Don't tell me that trash. You kill a Nigerian. Let any Nigerian die here. You will see what will be the consequences.
And this is Comrade Fundon Daniel speaking live here from the great state of Texas, here in the United States, on before, don't go, let me talk about
then you bring an armored car to the bridge, and then put soldiers on the bridge and say it's not war situation. You don't have to protect yourself.
Now, the question of separatists, let me be clarified because I want to make this clarifications. The word separatist is often used by the neighboring country and Republic and some other few countries. There is a great distinction between word separatist. Southern Cameroon is a separate entity. La Republique is a separate entity. And La Republique in 1960 got their independence under the French administrative authority. So therefore, La Republique is a separate entity in 1960, in which they present them as a separate entity. Southern Cameroon in 1961 is a separate entity. And for those who had the opportunity to read the U.S. Congress Congressional Research Paper, which is this, if you have opportunity and you have it with you, open to the first page. The first page, is it the first page? Let me see, it's the first page. U.S. Congress recognized that the British ignored the fundamental question of Southern Cameroon. The British ignored the fundamental question of Southern Cameroon. That fundamental question is referring to United Nations Resolution 1514. United Nations Resolution 1514. The United Nations Resolution 1514 called for decolonizations. Southern Cameroon met those criteria of decolonizations. If Southern Cameroon met the criteria of decolonizations, therefore, the people of Southern Cameroon should have decolonized. And on the false assumption that the population of Southern Cameroon did not meet the criteria, then now come in, why did Equatorial Guinea, that did not have the population of Southern Cameroon, was decolonized? Was decolonized? Now, on the question of separatists, who is really a separatist? If Douala Littoral Province choose to leave La Republique du Cameroun, is classified as a separatist because Littoral was part of La Republique du Cameroun in 1960 when France presented La Republique as a member of as a United Nations trustee territory. If Western Province choose to leave La Republique, that is a separatist. If Grand Nord choose to leave La Republique, that is a separatist because they were originally part of La Republique in 1960 when France presented La Republique to the United Nations. Now, come to the question of Southern Cameroon. Southern Cameroon is a separate entity. They came to this, what is so-called a wedding that never took place. They came as equal partner, and they have legal and authority to decide whether they should live in the wedding that never took place, or they have the right to withdraw from the wedding which never took place. And that is the question. Southern Cameroon, for those analysts or journalists or whatever, whom they often refer to Southern Cameroon as a separatist, it is absolutely immoral and wrong to use the word separatist in defining the Southern Cameroon question. I'm sure that makes sense, or it makes clear for understanding for the common person to understand, to differentiate between what is a separatist. Southern Cameroon is not unanimously the same as Western province choose, like what they call the Republic of Grassfield. The Republic of Grassfield, for you who are current of the information that they want to separate, that La Republique has to decide, because that is part of La Republique in 1960 when the United Nations defined the territorial integrity of La Republique in 1960. Southern Cameroon wasn't part of that territorial integrity. I hope that makes sense for the common understanding of everyone. Now let's go back to, stay tuned and don't go away.
Nation that you call yours, people can do what has been done to our children in West Cameroon. I call it West Cameroon because we will never take it out of our mouths again, because that is a territory in which we believe freedom. To go out on the street and demonstrate is a basic right for us, and that is why we are saying that there are two Cameroons that came together.
We must advance lasting security and peace. We know that instability and insecurity are at the top of nearly every Nigerian's mind. The same can be said for people in Ethiopia, Somalia, Mozambique, Cameroon, Mali, Niger, and other countries across the continent. The threats posed by violent extremists, by criminals, internal armed conflict, these threats are very real and so present in people's lives. So is there potential to destabilize nations and regions, to undermine development, to ignite humanitarian disasters. Part of the answer is effective and professional security forces and local law enforcement that can protect citizens while respecting human rights. And many of our partners across Africa want to build their capacities in these areas. But tackling the root causes of conflict is just as important, maybe even more important. Not everything can be solved with more or better equipped armed forces. And attempts to address violent extremism have at times had the perverse effect of violating people's rights, contributing to grievances, and furthering cycles of violence. We urge governments to contribute to and commit to criminal justice and security sector approaches that respect rights, as well as greater accountability for abuses, which is critical for earning the public's trust. We think we can achieve better results in confronting insecurity if we work together to expand economic opportunity, especially for young people and others who might be drawn into criminal activity out of desperation, out of a feeling that they have no other choice. And to resolve conflicts, we stand ready to support swift and sustained diplomacy with national leaders, with regional organizations, with international allies and partner citizens, including women, who must always be at the table when peace is negotiated, and also with international institutions, including the United Nations. That's what's happening right now with the crises and conflicts in Ethiopia, Sudan, and Somalia. African leaders and institutions have stepped up to steer the diplomatic response. African diplomats were leading engagement at the United
Seigneur,
Nations.
est-ce que c'est nous qui avons tué Jésus? Regardez Ali Bongo, il a une maladie qu'on appelle hémiplégie. Son un côté est paralysé. Cette paralysie peut atteindre même son cerveau. Malgré ça, il ne reste pas chez lui. Regardez. Oh Seigneur, oh la honte. Quelle honte pour l'Afrique. Mais malgré ça, il ne reste pas chez lui. Il devrait rester chez lui avec son âge pour que Macron se déplace pour aller dans son pays.
Sorry for the mixed messages. I brought that particular broadcast for the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, speaking about the Africa. But unfortunately, he hasn't touched the right issues. The right issues is because the United States is deviating from the truth. And because not speaking the truth, going about politics rather than the truth. And that is the impact that is affecting everyone in these conflicts. Now, until the United States understand, I am going to bring another additional the same U.S. Secretary of State. In this time, it was the U.S. Senator who is currently the U.S. President in the same argument on this. And I am asking his own Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, what is his actions? Of course, they know the truth, but are they deviating from the truth? Now, let me stay tuned, don't go away, and I will be right back.
Like the state minister stood here last week and told us that what happened in Cameroon is like dropping a few chips of sugar to a basin of water. Who is the sugar and who is the water? I'm asking.
that you adhere to, and then and I will go over them in a moment. Then you say on page 14, we must not become part of South Africa's problem. We must remain part of their solution. We must not aim to impose ourselves, our solutions, our favorites in South Africa. Damn it, we have favorites in South Africa. The favorites in South Africa are the people who are being repressed by that ugly white regime. We have favorites. Our loyalty is not to South Africa, it's to South Africans. And the South Africans are majority black, and they are being excoriated. It is not to some stupid puppet government over there. It is not to the Afrikaners regime. We have no loyalty to them. We have no loyalty to South Africa, to South Africans. And the fact of the matter is I listen to this rationale first of all. It is the leaders of South Africa and their people, black and white, who have the majority responsibility. They must rise to it. Well, they are rising to it. They're rising to it. The only thing left available with that repulsive, repugnant regime of Afrikaners there. And it's the only way they have. They've tried everything for the last 20 years. They begged, they borrowed, they crawled, and now they're taking up arms. The second thing, progress toward peace requires a timetable. Timetable, elimination of apartheid. What's our timetable? What are we saying to that repugnant regime? Are we saying you've got 20 days, 20 months, 20 years? We ask them to put up a timetable. What's our timetable? These people are being crushed. And we're sitting here with the same kind of rhetoric. The same thing we heard. We heard go slow. We heard we have to take care of the problem afterwards. We heard we can't impose.
You are totally misconstruing the testimony that I gave.
Read first.
Furthermore, Senator, let me say that I hate to hear a senator of the United States calling for violence.
I'm not calling
That's
for violence.
what you're doing.
I
That
hate
is
to hear.
exactly what you're
I
doing.
hate to hear an administration and a Secretary of State refusing to act on a morally abhorrent point. I hate to hear this country. I'm ashamed that this country puts out a policy like this that says nothing, nothing. What disturbs me more than the policy that you
We must advance lasting security and peace. We know that instability and insecurity are at the top of nearly every Nigerian's mind. The same could be said for people in Ethiopia, Somalia, Mozambique, Cameroun, Mali, Niger, and other countries across the continent. The threats posed by violent extremists, by criminals, internal armed conflict, these threats are very real and so present in people's lives. So is there potential to destabilize nations and regions, to undermine development, to ignite humanitarian disasters. Part of the answer is effective and professional security forces and local law enforcement that can protect citizens while respecting human rights. And many of our partners across Africa want to build their capacities in these areas. But tackling the root causes of conflict is just as important, maybe even more important. Not everything can be solved with more or better equipped armed forces. And attempts to address violent extremism have at times had the perverse effect of violating people's rights, contributing to grievances, and furthering cycles of violence. We urge governments to contribute to and commit to criminal justice and security sector approaches that respect rights, as well as greater accountability for abuses, which is critical for earning the public's trust. We think we can achieve better results in confronting insecurity if we work together to expand economic opportunity, especially for young people and others who might be drawn into criminal activity out of desperation, out of a feeling that they have no other choice. And to resolve conflicts, we stand ready to support swift and sustained diplomacy with national leaders, with regional organizations, with international allies and partner citizens, including women, who must always be at the table when peace is negotiated, and also with international institutions, including the United Nations. That's what's happening right now with the crises and conflicts in Ethiopia, Sudan, and Somalia. African leaders and institutions have stepped up to steer the diplomatic response. African diplomats are leading engagement at the United Nations, the World Trade Organization, the African Development Bank. The United States is using our diplomacy.
I'm sure you all listened. I first played a message that was speaking by the U.S. Senator, Mr. Joe Biden, who is currently the President of the United States, and bring the message of his current U.S. Secretary of State. Now, I am not going to speak on behalf of Nigeria, neither Ethiopia, Somali, but I'm going to speak on specifically on the Southern Cameroon questions. Of course, he mentioned, as you all listed, that we must tackle the root cause of the problem in order to resolve a crisis. And that is true. We must tackle the root cause in order to resolve a conflict. Now, the root cause of the conflict in Southern Cameroon is the United Nations Resolution 1540 XV. That called for decolonization. It did not call for partial decolonizations. And I want to hear the U.S. Secretary of State put this in his own word to recognize that the problem of Southern Cameroon or the Ambazonian question is United Nations Resolution 1514, which was partially or we would unjustly implemented without due considerations. It was unjustly implemented without due consideration. Whether does it merit, was it right? And that is what is bringing the problem of Southern Cameroon. Of course, United States, I'm going to bring some other foreign diplomats that have spoken on the question of Southern Cameroon. United Nations called for decolonization. Southern Cameroon should have been decolonized per United Nations Resolution 1514 XV. Why I keep on emphasizing on the United Nations Resolution 1514 XV? Because it is the key indicator that was the priority for nations post-World War II to decide the fate of territory that deserved their sovereign entity. So someone argued that because Southern Cameroon population did not merit, and I am wondering on the argument submitted by the British government on the false assumption that the people of Southern Cameroon did not merit. And then, what about Equatorial Guinea? The population in particular is not up to 1/10 the population of Southern Cameroon. That is a clear fact. 2. Southern Cameroon, in economic terms, they have excessive surplus in economic balance sheet at the time when these critical vital decisions were being made. Southern Cameroon balance sheet of economic was stable, more than the economic of La Republique du Cameroun at the time in 1960 or 1961. In fact, in 1975, you cannot go to the bank in La Republique du Cameroun and borrow 500,000 CFA. You have to travel to France to get an approval to get a 500,000 CFA loan. Whereas in Southern Cameroon, that same amount can be granted in Southern Cameroon Bank without even travel to Britain for confirmation. So why is it that the people of Southern Cameroon cannot sustain itself when in fact in economic excess or surplus in Southern Cameroon is more than the economic surplus in La Republique du Cameroun? Is it because they want to satisfy the interests of France rather than the interests of the people of Southern Cameroon or Ambazonian concern? So it is clear that the United States, as stated by the U.S. Secretary of State, that we must tackle the root cause of the problem. You cannot tackle the root cause of the problem if United Nations Resolution 1514 are not put in place to be the prime objective document in discussion. It is in fact that I present this U.S. Secretary of State that was being questioned by the Bidens as a senator. And now I bring his own secretary, and it happens that he is now the president. How much does the United States need to implement the United Nations Resolution 1514? We cannot bypass, you cannot resolve problems if you don't start on the root cause. And the root cause of Southern Cameroon is the United Nations Resolution 1514 XV. That should be the prime objective that the United States must recognize and put forward and recognize that nothing can be resolved if that particular United Nations resolution is not put in place. While the fighting is ongoing, La Republique du Cameroun does not show any interest of yielding to the call. And that is come to the point now that the United States must put every option on the table as a prime objective. Our people have suffered enough. We have reached that concrete point. I cannot emphasize more than any other one else. I cannot emphasize that the people of Southern Cameroon has reached a tipping point, and that except separation is the primary objective of the people of Southern Cameroon. We have had enough to limit every discussion within the United Nations, France blocked every form of communication to ever take place at the United Nations headquarters. France used all the avenues that you have in Africa. For example, the OAU, France made sure that whoever is heading that organization is a French-speaking, and that comes in, you have Fakari, the dealership that you have. He is a French, and France persuaded that he must be the head of. It is very amazing how poorly we Africans are. How can France, a European nation, will come and decide who should be the leader of the OAU organization in Africa? It is quite amazing and disturbing that Africa cannot make sound judgment without a foreign control dictate to them what they must do and what they cannot do. Why should France determine who should be the OAU Secretary General? Why should be France to determine a United Nations representative in Africa? It must be a French person. It is very, very unfortunate that Africans need to change their mind and their concept to acknowledge that they must be able to govern. Now, for the U.S. Secretary of State on the question of Southern Cameroon, U.S. Congress research, I urge the U.S. Secretary of State to read the U.S. Congressional report. I know State Department write its own report. Let the U.S. Secretary of State read the U.S. Congressional report. He emphasized the key point. Let me see, just stay tuned. The U.S. Congressional report. Let me see if I can go to the line. Let me see. Just stay tuned. Let me read some of the points presented by the U.S. Congress in a congressional research report. Activism in Cameroon living abroad has helped draw international attention against the conflict, including some members of Congress representative constituency attending to the conflict, including from some members of congressional representatives with Cameroon diaspora community. The perceived marginalization of Anglophones has long provoked demand for political reform, call for some activists for independence of the English demanding for a complete independence. It is not a question whether they're demanding for a complete independence. They should have got their independence, as I earlier indicated. United Nations Resolution 1514 should have been fully implemented. Now, let's look to CNN report. No, let's look at the Russian representative report, because it's not that every individual has pointed out this question. The Russian representative, let's look at the Russian representative speaking about the question of Southern Cameroon.
Mr. President, We are following developments in Cameroon closely. The issue of the Anglophone provinces finds its roots in the colonial period and the problems there. Unfortunately, this is not the first time we see decisions taken in the interest of former colonial powers having an impact on the situation in today's independent states who have to overcome this kind of legacy. Therefore, a solution to these problems can only be found around the negotiation table. All the Cameroonian sides should demonstrate restraint and refrain from using any form of violence.
That is a Russian representative. That's the Russian representative. Okay, now let's bring CNN analysts on the Southern Cameroon questions. Let's bring in CNN analysts. Or let's listen to the BBC report before we go to the CNN analyst. Let's listen to the BBC report.
Well, with the BBC World Service to Cameroon now, where soldiers have invaded a hospital in search of people they believe to be separatist fighters who may be receiving treatment there. Some of the staff were beaten up and doctors and patients harassed at one of the main hospitals in the Central African sub-region. There have been previous reports of hospitals being attacked or even burned down in the troubled English-speaking provinces of Cameroon. Our correspondent Randy Josaa is in the regional capital Bamenda, and he sent this report.
It was a normal day in the St. Elizabeth Catholic Hospital and Cardiac Center, Shisong, that receives patients for open heart surgery from the Central African sub-region. That is, until troops aboard 3 armored cars invaded. The Catholic-run hospital director, Sister Helen Ashoma Mbu, says heavily armed soldiers caused panic amongst patients, severely kicked and pounded some workers with gumboots and army boots. They insulted and threatened to shoot Reverend sisters in the legs if they failed to show where they believe separatist fighters were hiding. She adds in a protest letter to the authorities that she was obliged to conduct them around for a thorough search, even through surgical wards, the emergency units, female medical units, surgical units, maternities, private wards, amongst others, but nothing suspicious was found. Speaking to the BBC on the line to Kumbo, Bishop George Nkwo sounded very worried.
I'm extremely disappointed because this is not the first time the military has come in and ransacked the hospital, gone into sacred areas that nobody's supposed to go to, really, unless you are an expert, a medical person. They have done that over and over.
The authorities have not reacted to this latest incident on the hospital, but the general in charge of the army in the Northwest region has previously addressed the issue. Bishop George Nkwo again.
And I'm surprised that this is done again because sometimes the highest authority in the military have openly come to Shisong and apologized for this type of behavior. So I'm really disappointed that this has happened again. I know that we are living through difficult times, but there are certain areas, certain things that are sacrosanct. I just want to make a humble appeal to whoever is in charge, whoever gives instructions that you can go into school, go into hospital, and to the cardiac center, and even shoot guns and brutalize people in the hospital, and they speak shabbily to the religious who are there. I think that's beyond limits. It is too much. And my humble appeal will be that this should never happen again.
Several hospitals in the Northwest and Southwest regions have been shut down following similar life-threatening attacks. Some have been burnt down. Doctors and medical staff have simply fled some areas. This latest attack on the Shisong Cardiac Hospital has sparked tongue lashings from residents, rights groups and media in the crisis-torn region.
There are patients at that moment and the army has no right to invade a hospital, threaten doctors, threaten patients, beat up the guards. Very embarrassing. It's sad. What if it was the soldiers themselves that were sick and in the hospital? Would they expect the Amba boys to come there and hunt them? No.
Hospitals and churches are safe havens in times of war or crisis like this. So I don't see the reason why soldiers will invade the hospital. We have heard of people being shot in churches as well. The Amba boys and the soldiers attacking schools.
Gabi Ambo, a human rights consultant, has been observing the crisis unfolding in the past 5 years.
As per Resolution 1612 of the United Nations Security Council, we definitely do not allow access to hospitals, access to schools, or let alone maim or kill children, or deny access to humanitarian services. And you can name the list in that order. And sexual violence perpetrated on citizens. It's not allowed. But this is exactly what this army actually does with the dawn of every new day. By the day, they get involved in actions of this nature, and no one says a word. No one speaks. Not even the United Nations, not even the international community. Let's talk about the government in place and other partners. It is traumatizing, it's annoying. And so we're saying here now, on behalf of FGI, we condemn the act of the Cameroon military, most especially in Chishon, in combining other places where they have actually entered the hospital and pulled out people. I can still remember freshly the case in Bamenda Hospital, where I was myself present, where the military came in and they were rushing the medical doctor on duty early in the morning to go show places of the watch where they have to pull out some patients, and the doctor refused, that she cannot do that. This is unbelievable. This is not acceptable, and we think this should come to a stop.
Both the military and Ambazonia separatist fighters have on different occasions been accused of targeting hospitals to catch their wounded enemies.
And that's Randy Josa reporting there from Cameroon.
Of course, now you listen from other perspective view. Now, in fact, for those who are claiming that the people of Southern Cameroon must work with La Republique de Cameroun, imagine you as a citizen of Southern Cameroon witnessing this behavior of the military of La Republique de Cameroun, in which legally and legitimately they have no privilege over in Southern Cameroon, in fact. And that is why I began by the United Nations Resolution 1514 XV, which explicitly states that decolonization, the people of Southern Cameroon will not have been going through this traumatized by La Republique du Cameroun military if the United Nations Resolution 1514 was respected. In fact, since this current president that we have, we call Paul Biya, since he came to power in 1982, he has not, if somebody has evidence, then the person can prove here that I am speaking wrong. There is no construction that has carried out, especially hospital. I remember when I traveled to Bamenda to observe my own dad that had an injury, and I met the condition of the hospital. It was absolutely deplorable. That was a potential government hospital in Southern Cameroon territory, and not at this moment that the crisis has erupted. It was deeply deplorable. La Republique du Cameroon has not invested in infrastructural development in Southern Cameroon. Why is it that the people of Southern Cameroon must remain under the umbrella with La Republique du Cameroon? Give me the circumstances that enable every citizen of Southern Cameroon to appreciate living together with La Republique du Cameroon. None. The hospital that they're referring to is a Catholic constructed hospital. That's a missionary hospital that has no subvention from La Republique du Cameroon. And yet they have the audacity to penetrate and carry on destructive behavior, massacres, slaughtering, and even shooting physicians. Threatened. You listen from a BBC reporter on the Southern Cameroon question. Why is it that the United States believe that the people of Southern Cameroon must live under the foreign umbrella of La Republique du Cameroon? Exactly. There's no evidence and that the people of Southern Cameroon will choose to live with La Republique du Cameroon in any circumstances. Now you listen from the BBC reporter. Then let me bring you another report why Southern Cameroon question remain at large. Now let's come to the CNN report on a verbal truth and negligence.
Judd, if you are somebody from West Africa, from parts of Central Africa, of course, you likely do know about the Anglophone crisis in Cameroon. But this war does seem to get very little attention in the international media. It does seem to be relatively less well known than, say, what's happening in Tigray. Why is that?
Well, I think that it's been neglected, and that's been a real tragedy. And the reasons are pretty self-explanatory. This is a very complex crisis in a medium-sized country, and it's been simmering since 2016, 2017. And so most of the international media, not your program of course, doesn't spend a lot of time on Africa. And so they're focused on Ethiopia or the Sahel or Nigeria. These are easier to convey to international communities what the stakes are. But Cameroon ends up getting short shrift. I would note that the international community, diplomats, the U.S. Congress, Africans are engaged on this topic and on this crisis, but they're not having much effect.
So what can the regional community, obviously France and Cameroon have a good working relationship as well, what can the regional community actually do to create some kind of resolution, to work towards some kind of ceasefire?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of challenges, right? First of all, the government so far has only made very superficial concessions. It's really dragged its feet. And on the side of the Anglophones, well, it's very divided, very fragmented. You've got elements that are for peace, just the cessation of conflict. You've got elements that want a new federal or confederal arrangement, and then you've got the secessionists. And some of them can be very hardline, very violent, attacking civilians, attacking each other. And so this has been difficult because who do you negotiate? I think the international community, though, and we've seen the Swiss do this a little bit, can bring these sides together to set up some agreed upon standards and agreed upon benchmarks for moving towards peace. But we're going to have to see a more robust and higher level engagement if we want to move forward.
And from France's perspective, they're unlikely to put that much pressure on Cameroon at this point in time. Cameroon has been very useful to France in terms of fighting terrorism. It's been very useful in terms of welcoming refugees from the Central African Republic. So Paris, Emmanuel Macron, they're unlikely to rock the boat too much at this time.
Yeah, you nailed it, right? Cameroon's an incredibly important counterterrorism partner for French. It's also important for the Central African Republic. And President Paul Biya of Cameroon has this long relationship with Paris, going back decades. So they're unlikely to upset the apple cart. And finally, and we see this with Paris's relationship across the region, they don't want to do things in a public manner. They don't want to potentially embarrass their former colonies. So everything is quiet. Everything is sort of behind the scenes. And it's not to say they haven't condemned some of the human rights abuses or called for dialogue, but it has been very muted in general, given what the problems are.
And so after this broadcast, I'm going to conclude this. So now let's listen to the Talaba. The Talaba is a very interesting thing. I know I spoke about it at the beginning of this broadcast. Talaba is where they indicate that the Ambazonians, separatists, as the so-called separatists, are invading Talaba. And that is why I brought this initially, and then I'm going to conclude with it. That is a Nigerian representative. And just directly opposite is the armored car of La Republique du Cameroun that is penetrating. And then you can watch, and then from there we're going to conclude this broadcast. I want you to just watch.
Please, I am experiencing
Now you can watch. That's they call the separatists. And the separatists attacking the Nigerian in the colonial area. That is why I bring this video for you to watch. And then we can
that is very wrong. That is very wrong.
That is a Nigerian elected representative.
International rules does not accept any operation on top of the bridge.
And when you look at critical,
you are shooting, will he kill us? If they don't kill you, the shooting will kill us
on the side of Nigeria.
The shooting will kill us here. We cannot accept this shooting that will kill us on the bridge here. We cannot accept it. I will never accept the situation that your weapon will kill us at this time. The shooting is into Nigeria and it's unacceptable. It is not tolerable. We cannot accept it. Don't tell me that kind of trash, my friend. Don't tell me that kind of trash. You're talking nonsense. Don't tell me that nonsense. Don't tell me that nonsense. You cannot bring soldiers on the bridge and fire into Nigeria and tell me this trash. Don't tell me that trash. You kill a Nigerian. Let any Nigerian die here. You see what will be the consequences. Please get inside and get me out of here. Don't get it. Everybody should get away out of that place. Because I cannot say in this situation that you bring an armor to the bridge and then put soldiers on the bridge and say it's not worth the question. You don't have to protect yourself. That's the thing I'm talking to now. I cannot see this kind of problem. I cannot accept this situation. We cannot accept this situation. That you bring an armor to the bridge and bring soldiers to the bridge and the following to the
in this end, I draw the conclusion for this broadcast. This has been Comrade Funton Daniel speaking live here from the great state of Texas on the Southern Cameroon questions. And I really appreciate all of you that are watching this broadcast, and thanks everyone. And we will continue in these deliberations and then asking the United Nations Resolution 1514 XV is vital and it should be applied to everyone, not selective basis. Thank you, appreciate you. Good night.